When my wife secretly sold the home I spent 45 years building a life in, I didn't shout. I smiled, poured her tea, and let her believe she had already won. By the time she realized what I was really doing, the papers she signed had ended her plans forever. And that was only the beginning of her lesson. Some promises are worth keeping, even if it means protecting them from the person you thought you could trust the most. You won't believe how I turned the tables. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me, what would you do if you were in my shoes? My name is Harold Sutton, 72 years old, retired carpenter, and proud owner, or so I thought, of a red brick colonial on Willow Avenue. I had lived there for nearly half a century, and it had seen everything from my wedding day to my granddaughter's first steps. Every creak in the floor and every scratch on the banister told a chapter of my story. I built the back porch in the summer of '79, sweating through my shirt, but whistling as I worked, because I knew it would be where we would drink lemonade on warm evenings. I planted the maple tree in the front yard the week my daughter Emily was born, watching it grow taller each year as she did. I replaced the roof myself after a brutal winter storm in '85, swearing I would never hire anyone for a job I could handle with my own two hands. That house wasn't just a building. It was my anchor, the one constant in a life that had seen its share of storms. Margaret, my wife of 48 years, had once loved it just as much. Or at least, I thought she had. Over time, something in her changed. I didn't notice it right away, but gradually she started making more phone calls, her voice lowering whenever I walked into the room. She met strangers by the curb instead of inviting them inside. She began talking about how big the house felt now that it was just the two of us. I brushed it off at first because Margaret had always enjoyed browsing real estate listings online, daydreaming about beach cottages or mountain cabins. But her recent cheerfulness, her secrecy, and the way she carried herself didn't feel right to me. I told myself I was imagining things because after nearly 5 decades together, she wouldn't keep serious secrets from me. Then came the Wednesday afternoon that changed everything. I had left my volunteer shift at the Veterans Center early because of a last-minute schedule change. As I turned onto Willow Avenue, I saw a silver sedan parked in front of the house. A man in a dark suit stood beside Margaret, pointing toward the roof. By the time I reached the porch, they were shaking hands like old friends. "What's going on here?" I asked calmly, though suspicion edged my voice. Margaret's eyes flicked to the man, then back to me. "Oh, this is just someone from Crescent Properties," she said quickly. The man smiled politely, nodded, and walked to his car without another word. That night, I tried to press her for answers, but she brushed me off. "Don't get worked up, Harry. You'll see soon enough." That answer gave me a chill. During the days that followed, I noticed her humming while making dinner, her steps light and her smile secretive. It was the smile of someone who had a plan she wasn't sharing. I should have confronted her then, but part of me still didn't want to believe it. 6 days later, the truth came knocking at my front door. A woman in a navy blazer stood there, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Sutton?" she asked. "That's me," I said. "I'm here for the pre-closing inspection for the sale of your property." For a moment, I thought she was at the wrong address. "Sale? There must be a mistake," I told her. She glanced at her papers. No mistake. 63 Willow Avenue, Harold and Margaret Sutton. Closing date in 6 days. I felt my chest tighten. "I didn't sell this house." She gave a polite but awkward smile. "Oh, then I assume your wife handled the paperwork." After she left, I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door. Then I walked to Margaret's desk, opened the top drawer, and found the truth. Contracts, payment receipts, a signed agreement with her name on every important line. It was all legal. Margaret had sold the home I had poured my life into without telling me. When she came home that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out, like a deck of cards between us. She froze in the doorway, her eyes darting from my face to the documents. "Harry, I can explain. Go ahead," I said evenly. She sat down slowly, smoothing her skirt. "It was too good an offer to pass up," she said. "This place is too big for us. We can take the money, travel, live somewhere smaller." "And you decided all of that on your own?" I asked. "You would have said no," she replied, without hesitation. I studied her face, the same face I had looked at across countless breakfasts and dinners, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about selling a house. This was about trust, respect, and the quiet belief that your partner will stand beside you, not work behind you. Margaret thought she had taken control of the story, but she didn't know me as well as she thought she did, because I had no intention of letting her keep the comfort she had stolen from me. I had built my life with my own two hands. Now I was about to dismantle hers, one careful move at a time. After discovering Margaret's secret sale, my world felt unsteady, as if the very floor beneath me was shifting beneath my feet. I needed time to think, time to understand how the woman I had trusted for nearly 50 years could betray everything we had built together. That evening, I sat in my favorite armchair by the fireplace, the low crackle of the flames filling the heavy silence that had settled over the house. The house was still mine for now, but I knew that would soon change. Margaret's actions were not just a betrayal of our marriage. They were a betrayal of the future we had planned side by side for decades. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid reflecting the dancing firelight. Every sip burned like a reminder that nothing would ever be the same again. I started going through the papers again, scanning every line and clause, looking for any clue I might have missed. There, buried deep in the fine print, was a clause I hadn't noticed before, a right of first refusal. It meant that if Margaret or the buyer decided to back out, I could buy the house back before it went to anyone else. That clause was my lifeline, but I knew it would not be easy to use. The closing date was just days away, and the money that Margaret received was already sitting in an account I had no access to. I had to be smart, patient, and most of all, careful. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Thomas Reed, a sharp, no-nonsense man who had helped me with everything from my will to tax issues. I trusted Thomas like family. I explained the entire situation, and he promised to review the documents immediately. "Harold," he said firmly, "you might have more options than you think." His confidence sparked a flicker of hope in me. Over the next several days, I watched Margaret closely, trying to read her intentions through the walls she was building around herself. She acted as if nothing had happened, laughing at jokes I didn't find funny, asking about the garden, and mentioning vacations she dreamed about. But I could see it in her eyes, a quiet distance, a secret she thought I would never uncover. I wondered when the woman I had married had slipped away. One afternoon, while Margaret was out running errands, I decided to visit the local property records office. I spent hours sifting through files, searching for anything related to the buyer. His name was Paul Hamilton, a wealthy developer notorious for tearing down old homes to build towering modern apartments. If he got his hands on Willow Avenue, the quiet charm of our neighborhood would vanish forever. That thought sent a cold wave right down my spine. I felt a surge of determination grow inside me. This was not just about me or Margaret anymore. It was about protecting the legacy of the life I had built. I remembered my father telling me once, "A man's home is his fortress." I was ready to defend mine, no matter the cost. That evening, I started drafting a plan, careful, calculated, and relentless. I would use every legal and personal resource at my disposal. I would remind Margaret and Paul Hamilton that I was not a man to be underestimated or pushed aside. The first step was to slow down the closing process. Thomas advised me to file an injunction to delay the sale while we reviewed the contract for any loopholes or breaches of agreement. We also began investigating the buyer's background and financial dealings. If there was any dirt to uncover, we would find it. In the meantime, I reached out to my daughter Emily, hoping for some support. I hesitated before telling her everything. She was busy raising her own family, and I didn't want to burden her unnecessarily. But when I finally did, she was shocked and angry. Angry on my behalf and disappointed in her mother. "I can't believe Mom would do this," she said. "I'm on your side, Dad. We'll get through this." Her words gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Together, we began researching neighborhood zoning laws and the developers' previous projects. Emily even reached out to a local community group that opposed Hamilton's developments. It was clear that if the sale went through, our quiet street would be unrecognizable in a matter of months. Each night, I lay awake thinking about the memories packed in every room, the birthdays, anniversaries, late-night talks, and quiet mornings. I refused to let those be erased by greed and secrecy. At the same time, I knew I had to prepare for confrontation. Margaret wasn't going to give up easily, and Paul Hamilton was a man used to getting what he wanted. I decided it was time to start gathering evidence of Margaret's secret dealings. I set up a small camera in the living room to capture any conversations or visits related to the sale. Every detail mattered. One evening, the camera recorded a conversation between Margaret and Paul. Her voice was calm but firm. "We're almost there," she said. "Everything's in place, and the closing is scheduled for next Friday." Paul replied, "Good. I want that property cleared and ready for demolition within 2 months." Hearing those words confirmed my worst fears, but it also steeled my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, my memories, and my future. As the days ticked down toward the closing date, I prepared for a final showdown. I rehearsed what I would say and planned how to present the evidence. I knew I had to remain calm and focused. Losing my temper would only give Margaret the upper hand. Every moment felt like walking a tightrope. I felt isolated but determined. I had become a man with a mission to protect all that rightfully belonged to me. Stay tuned to learn how I took the next crucial steps toward turning the tables. If you are inspired by this story, please hit the like button and share your thoughts below. What would you do if you were in my situation? The day after I set up the camera in the living room, I woke early with a restless mind. I knew time was running out, and the closer the closing date got, the more desperate Margaret and Paul would become. I reviewed the footage from the camera. Again, watching Margaret's secret meetings unfold like a hidden play. Her calm, collected demeanor was chilling, but I noticed small slips, moments when tension flickered in her eyes. I realized she was as trapped in this as I was, caught between greed and guilt. That thought didn't soften my resolve, but it gave me a glimpse into her struggle. I wasn't alone in this battle. Emily called that afternoon, her voice steady and firm. "Dad, I found some old zoning petitions from the neighborhood. If we can show the developer's plans violate them, we might have legal grounds to stop the sale." I felt a surge of hope. Together, we plotted a strategy to delay the process legally. Thomas worked on drafting the injunction papers, and I prepared to face Margaret one last time. The house that had once been a sanctuary felt more like a battlefield now. When Margaret came home that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out like a deck of cards between us. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and defiance. "Harold," she said quietly, "this isn't what you think." But I wasn't fooled. "I know everything, Margaret." Her face hardened. I did what I had to do. I held up the contract and the footage from the camera. She stared at them as if seeing ghosts. "Why?" I asked. She looked away, the fight draining from her eyes. "Because I was tired, Harold. Tired of feeling invisible. Tired of struggling while you worked 3 jobs to pay for this house." Her words stung, but they also hit a nerve of truth I couldn't ignore. The years had changed us both, but the pain was real. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, "but I needed a way out." I sat back, weighing my next move carefully. "Margaret, this isn't just about us anymore. It's about the legacy of this home, the memories we built here, and I won't let it slip away without a fight." She nodded slowly, the tension in the room shifting. For the first time in weeks, we talked, honestly, painfully, but openly. I explained my plan to delay the sale and rally the community. She listened, and though she didn't agree, she didn't argue. That night, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected, a fragile hope for reconciliation. But the battle was far from over. Over the next days, Thomas filed the injunction, and the legal wheels began to turn. Paul Hamilton's legal team pushed back hard, threatening lawsuits and public relations campaigns to speed things up. The neighborhood grew restless, caught between preservation and progress. Emily became a fierce advocate, rallying neighbors and speaking at town meetings. Her passion reminded me of the strength that still lived inside me. Late one night, I found a letter slipped under our door, a thinly veiled warning from Hamilton's legal team. It said, "This fight will cost you more than you're willing to pay." I folded the letter carefully, a quiet fire burning in my chest. I wasn't about to give up. Each day, I collected more evidence and testimony, building a case stronger than any contract clause. And through it all, Margaret remained distant, a silent shadow in the house. One afternoon, I caught her standing by the window, staring out with a sadness I hadn't seen before. I walked over slowly. "Margaret, can we talk?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted to lose you." I reached out, taking her hand gently. "We may be at war now, but I still believe in us, in what we once had." Her eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment, the years between us seemed to melt away. But reality pressed in hard. We were fighting more than just a sale. We were fighting the fractures time had carved into our lives. Days passed, the injunction holding strong, buying us time. Then came the unexpected, a surprise meeting request from Paul Hamilton himself. He wanted to talk. I wasn't sure if it was a trap or a chance for peace, but I knew I had to take it. I prepared meticulously, reviewing every detail, ready to face the man who threatened everything I held dear. The meeting was tense. Paul was smooth, confident, and unapologetic. He offered a deal: sell the house now, with a generous payout that would secure my retirement comfortably. But I saw through the offer. It was a way to divide and conquer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton," I said firmly, "but this home means more than money to me. I won't let it go without a fight." Paul smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We'll see about that, Harold." Walking away from that meeting, I felt a renewed strength. This was no longer just about protecting a house. It was about reclaiming my dignity and proving that even in our later years, we still have the power to stand up and fight for what matters most. Stay tuned, where the plan takes a dramatic turn. If you are moved by this story, please hit the like button and share your thoughts. What would you do if you were in Harold's shoes? The team led by Paul Hamilton continued their campaign, refusing to relent. Their pressure was relentless, like a storm that refused to break, crashing over every barrier I set up. Their resources seemed limitless, and their strategy was coldly calculated. Every day, I felt the weight of this fight grow heavier on my shoulders. The house, once full of laughter and warm memories, had grown silent and cold, as though it sensed the battle raging over its future. Margaret had become withdrawn, quiet during the evenings, her eyes clouded with regret. The woman I had trusted for nearly 50 years seemed like a stranger lost in a fog of her own making. One crisp morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window as Emily arrived, her face glowing with hope and determination. "Dad, I've been talking to neighbors," she said with steady excitement. "There's a group of people who feel just like us, angry and scared. If we gather enough signatures, we could force a community referendum to stop the sale." Her words lit a spark inside me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt for weeks. Together, Emily and I set out on a mission, knocking on doors, sharing our story and listening to those of others. Every door opened to memories, shared histories, and a deep love for the neighborhood. One elderly woman showed us black and white photos of children playing in the yard decades ago. Another neighbor shared stories of holiday dinners and summer barbecues held in the house's backyard. It became clear that this was not just my fight anymore. It was a community's fight. The house was more than wood and bricks. It was a cornerstone of their lives, a symbol of shared history and hope. Meanwhile, Margaret and I began a fragile healing. One afternoon, to my surprise, she invited me to the garden. The once lush yard had turned wild with weeds and dry soil, but we spent hours side by side, clearing and planting anew. "I'm sorry for what I did," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "I hadn't understood before how deeply this house mattered to you and to all of us." I squeezed her hand, feeling warmth return that I thought was lost forever. "We've both made mistakes, but we still have a chance to make things right," I answered. As the days passed, the community's strength grew. Neighbors rallied, their voices joining ours to defend what mattered most. The team led by Paul Hamilton continued their campaign, refusing to relent. They launched a smear campaign, trying to paint us as selfish troublemakers blocking progress. Flyers appeared on car windshields, local papers printed misleading articles, and whispers of doubt spread. One cold evening, our phone rang, and a harsh voice warned, "Drop the fight or face the consequences." Though fear tried to take hold, I refused to be intimidated. This was about more than a house. It was about legacy, family, and justice. With the referendum day approaching, tensions reached a boiling point. Some neighbors who had been friendly now avoided me, while others whispered doubts. Emily and Thomas remained steadfast, organizing meetings, preparing legal defenses, and keeping hope alive. Every day was a test of will, a battle of hearts, as much as legal arguments. On voting day, the town hall was packed, filled with people, young and old, united by their love for the neighborhood and the memories it held. When the results came in, the victory was narrow but decisive. The community had spoken, the sale was blocked. Cheers erupted, but inside I felt a quiet, steady satisfaction. This was only the beginning, not the end. That night, Margaret and I sat quietly by the fire, flames dancing shadows on the walls. We reflected on how far we'd come and how much remained ahead. "We still have a long road," I said softly, "but at least we're walking it together." Now, her eyes met mine, sorrow and hope mingling in their depths. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. The house, once threatened by betrayal and greed, had become a symbol of resilience, not just of walls and beams, but of family, community, and second chances. In the days that followed, the neighborhood came alive with renewed energy. Block parties, potlucks, and shared projects filled the streets as people bonded over the fight they had won. Emily spearheaded a community garden initiative, turning vacant lots into green spaces that brought neighbors together. Thomas organized historical walking tours, sharing stories of the neighborhood's past to remind everyone why the house mattered. So much. Margaret and I grew closer too, slowly rebuilding trust one moment at a time. We made plans to repair the house, not just physically, but emotionally, a fresh start built on honesty and love. But beneath it all, I knew the fight was not over. The team led by Paul Hamilton was still lurking, waiting for a chance to strike back. The house was safe for now, but vigilance was needed to keep it that way. The battle had changed me, from a man broken by betrayal to one filled with quiet strength and purpose. I had learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge is not in confrontation, but in protecting what you love with unwavering resolve. If Harold's story has moved you, please hit the like button and share what you would do if you are standing where he stands today. Thank you for following this journey. Stay with us, where the plan to secure the house moves forward in a way no one expects. I had come a long way since the day the betrayal hit me so hard. Winning the referendum had been a huge step, but I knew the real battle to protect my home was just beginning. Paul Hamilton's team still operated behind the scenes, quietly searching for any way to break our defenses. Hope alone wouldn't be enough. I needed a clear, solid plan, one that combined smart legal moves, strong community ties, and unwavering vigilance. The first thing I did was gather my closest allies, neighbors who cared as deeply as I did, lifelong friends who had stood by me through every hardship, and of course, my children Emily and Thomas. Their support fueled my determination more than I could express. One chilly Saturday morning, I called a meeting at the local community center. The room quickly filled with concerned but hopeful faces. Looking around, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders, but I spoke with steady confidence. This house is more than just a building, I told them. It holds our memories, our history, and everything we have built together. We must protect it together. I shared the plan I had crafted, which rested on 3 key pillars: solid legal defense, improved security, and rebuilding our community. Spirit. The first step was hiring a lawyer specializing in property and inheritance law. Together, we meticulously combed through every document connected to the house, searching for any loopholes or weaknesses in Hamilton's claims. We uncovered hidden clauses buried deep in the fine print details that could cancel unauthorized sales or force renegotiations on fair terms. I made multiple copies of every crucial document, safely distributing them among trusted neighbors, so no one could catch us off guard. Emily stepped up to organize a neighborhood watch program. She recruited volunteers and trained them to stay alert without causing unnecessary alarm. I installed discreet cameras and alarms inside the house to monitor activity day and night without turning our home into a fortress. Keeping the neighborhood friendly and welcoming was vital to me. Week after week, our collective efforts began to bear fruit. Neighbors who once kept to themselves started volunteering with enthusiasm. We planted community gardens, organized neighborhood cleanups, and hosted local history tours that reminded everyone why this house and this neighborhood meant so much. A new sense of unity blossomed. Old friendships rekindled, and new ones were forged. I felt a renewed sense of belonging and purpose I hadn't experienced in years. Still, the threat from Paul Hamilton's team was very real. Their reach ran deep into the town's politics, and rumors spread of underhanded tactics they might attempt next. One cold evening after a meeting, I noticed a dark sedan parked suspiciously across the street. The driver locked eyes with me for a tense moment before speeding away. It was a silent warning. Paul's people were watching. But I refused to be intimidated. I doubled down, spending late nights poring over documents, coordinating with allies, and refining our strategy. Margaret and I started to slowly mend the fractures between us. Though the betrayal left a deep wound, honest conversations and shared hopes began to rebuild the trust we once had. We talked about restoring the house to its former glory and making new memories grounded in love and forgiveness. I realized this fight wasn't mine alone anymore. It had become a beacon of hope for the entire neighborhood. Even skeptics began to see the strength in unity. They contributed their time, voices, and hearts to the cause. In quiet moments, I reflected on the journey, from the sting of betrayal to becoming a leader, from loss to resilience. This house was no longer just mine to protect. It symbolized family, community, and justice. As Paul Hamilton's team schemed their next moves, I stood ready, undeterred, and strong. My story was now woven into the lives of everyone who called this place home. If my determination inspires you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts below. Your support means the world and keeps this story alive. Stay tuned, where the battle reaches a crucial turning point and unexpected allies step forward to tip the scales. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just winning the fight, it's about restoring what truly matters: trust, love, and legacy. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Together, we would face whatever came next. The house, the memories, and the future were worth every ounce of effort. I was ready for whatever challenge awaited. Over the weeks that followed, I kept a close eye on every move Hamilton's camp made. I tracked their legal maneuvers carefully, always a step ahead thanks to the hard work of my lawyer. I held frequent meetings with neighbors, listening to their concerns and ideas. Their courage kept me going during dark moments. Emily's neighborhood watch caught a few suspicious visitors, and we reported them to the local police, who promised to increase patrols. We weren't letting intimidation win. Margaret surprised me one afternoon with a batch of freshly baked cookies for the community center meeting, a small gesture that lifted my spirits. Those little moments reminded me why I fought so hard. It wasn't just about the house or the land. It was about protecting the heart of everything we had built together. Every time I felt doubt creeping in, I thought of the generations before me who had poured their lives into this neighborhood. I couldn't let their legacy slip away. So I pushed forward, fueled by love, grit, and an unwavering sense of justice. The house stood tall, a symbol of resistance against greed and betrayal, and I was its guardian, ready to defend it with everything I had. The weeks of watchfulness had paid off, but I knew we were standing on a razor's edge. Paul Hamilton's people were too quiet lately, and silence from an opponent like that never meant peace. It meant plotting. One frosty Thursday morning, Emily burst into the house, her cheeks flushed from the cold and from urgency. "Dad, you need to see this," she said, handing me a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of a building permit application with Hamilton's name stamped at the bottom, seeking approval to demolish the house under an emergency structural hazard claim. My jaw tightened. If approved, that permit would override everything we had fought for. I called Thomas immediately. He read through the document with a practiced eye, then looked at me gravely. "They're claiming the house is unsafe. If the inspector agrees, they can tear it down within days." My heart pounded, but I forced myself to think clearly. I had restored this house with my own two hands, and there was nothing unsafe about it. This was a manufactured excuse, and I intended to prove it. That night, I gathered our allies at the community center. Emily's neighborhood watch, the older residents who had rallied for the referendum, and even a few who had been skeptical. At first, all came. I laid the permit on the table for everyone to see. "They're trying to end this fight in one swift move," I said. "If we let this stand, it's over." Heads nodded and voices murmured agreement. A few neighbors shared their own stories of past run-ins with developers who used shady tactics to take over properties. One man described how his cousin lost a historic home to a similar emergency order that was later proven false, but by then, the damage had been done. Their anger mirrored my own, and it fueled my resolve. The next morning, before the inspector could arrive, I invited a trusted independent structural engineer, who was a friend of Thomas, to evaluate the house. He combed through every beam, every floorboard, and every brick, taking meticulous notes and photographs. His conclusion was exactly what I expected, that the house was structurally sound and posed no danger whatsoever. He even commented on the craftsmanship, saying he hadn't seen work that solid in decades. I felt a flicker of victory, but I knew we had to be strategic. I made sure his report was thorough, signed, and time-stamped, so Hamilton's people couldn't claim it was doctored. When the official inspection day arrived, the air outside was sharp with the bite of winter. Hamilton himself stood across the street, flanked by his team, smugness painted across his face. A black SUV idled nearby, its tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. Margaret stood beside me on the porch, her shoulders squared. "We're ready," she whispered. I glanced at her and saw the determination in her eyes, a stark contrast to the guilt I had seen weeks ago. The inspector, clipboard in hand, walked the property with a critical eye. I stayed close, answering every question, pointing out recent repairs and showing proof of maintenance. Emily handed him the independent report we had commissioned, and I saw his brow lift in interest. Hamilton's lawyer tried to interrupt, claiming the private report was irrelevant, but Thomas stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "The truth is never irrelevant." That line seemed to hang in the air like a challenge, and I caught a few neighbors nodding in approval. The inspector took his time, moving from room to room, occasionally tapping on walls, checking the basement supports, and even climbing into the attic. I followed him silently, my heart beating in my ears, every step feeling like it could be the one that decided the fate of this house. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by curiosity and loyalty. Neighbors held thermoses of coffee, some with cameras in hand to document the visit. Their presence was a quiet shield against any underhanded move Hamilton's team might try. After nearly an hour, the inspector closed his notes and stepped back onto the porch. "From what I see," he said finally, "there's no basis for an emergency demolition order." The color drained from Hamilton's face. He tried to recover, muttering about appeals, but the blow had landed. The permit was denied on the spot. A wave of relief washed over me so strongly I had to grip the railing. Cheers erupted from the crowd that had gathered at the curb, neighbors who had shown up to witness the inspection, ready to defend the home with their presence alone. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with relief. "You did it," she said softly. I shook my head. "We did it. All of us." Across the street, Hamilton turned away, his perfect posture bent just slightly, the first crack in his armor. I could see the tension in his jaw as he climbed into the waiting SUV and disappeared down the street. Emily threw her arms around me, and for a moment, the weight I had been carrying for months seemed to lift. But I knew this was not the end. Hamilton had resources, and men like him didn't back off after one defeat. As the sun dipped behind the maple tree in the yard I planted decades ago, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just a win, it was the moment the balance shifted. Hamilton had thrown his hardest punch, and we were still standing. The house was still ours. The community was more united than ever. And now the next move would be mine. In the days after the inspection victory, the neighborhood felt different, as if the air itself carried a quiet pride. People stopped me on the street to offer congratulations, and for the first time in months, I slept without waking in the middle of the night to check the windows or look out for suspicious cars. Margaret began to spend more time by my side, helping with small repairs around the house, joining Emily in community meetings, and even baking pies for the neighborhood watch volunteers. But I knew better than to think Paul Hamilton was gone. For good, Men like him didn't walk away. They waited for a weakness. That thought kept me vigilant. Thomas and I met twice a week to review any legal filings or new permits in the area. Emily kept the neighborhood watch active, making sure every unfamiliar vehicle was noted, and every piece of gossip about Hamilton's plans was passed along. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, Thomas called with news. "Harold," he said, "Hamilton's company just purchased the lot 2 streets over. It's zoned differently, so he might shift his focus there." I felt a mix of relief and unease. If Hamilton moved his target, it meant my home was safer, but it also meant another part of our community could be in danger. I told Thomas we'd keep watch, but I wouldn't get complacent. The fight had taught me that victory only lasted as long as you protected it. The weeks rolled by with the steady rhythm of a community rebuilding itself. The garden Emily had started began to bloom, even in the chill of early spring. Children played in yards without their parents glancing nervously down the street. People lingered longer on front porches, talking, laughing, and planning neighborhood events. The fear that had once shadowed every conversation was fading. One sunny Saturday, Margaret and I hosted a block barbecue in our backyard. It was the first time in years. The place felt alive the way it had in my younger days. The smell of grilled burgers and the sound of laughter filled the air. Neighbors brought dishes to share, and someone even set up a small band in the corner. Emily gave a short speech, thanking everyone for standing together and reminding them that the house we'd fought for was more than a building. It was a symbol of what could be accomplished when people cared enough to act. I stood beside her, listening, feeling a swell of pride I couldn't quite put into words. Later that night, after the last of the folding chairs had been stacked and the grill was covered, Margaret and I sat on the porch steps. The maple tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves whispering in the dim light. She took my hand and said, "I don't know how to make up for what I did, Harold, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for nearly half a century, and I saw the sincerity in her eyes. "We start by being honest from here on," I said. "No more secrets. No more decisions made in the dark." She nodded, and in that moment, the wound she had caused felt like it had begun to heal. In the weeks that followed, we turned our attention to repairing the house in earnest. Not just patching what needed fixing, but restoring it to its full beauty. I refinished the porch railings, sanded and stained the floors, and repainted the shutters the deep green they had been when Emily was a little girl. Margaret planted new flowers in the garden beds, and Emily convinced the neighbors to help repaint the picket fence. It became a project everyone could be proud of. The transformation was so striking that the local paper sent a reporter to cover it. They ran a story about how one man's fight to save his home had sparked a neighborhood revival. There was a picture of me, Emily, and Margaret standing in front of the house, all smiling, with the headline, "Community Unites to Save Historic Willow Avenue Home." When I read the article, I thought back to the night I first found the sale papers on Margaret's desk. If someone had told me then that we would end up here, stronger than before, I would have laughed. But life had a way of surprising you. A month later, I heard through Thomas that Hamilton had indeed shifted his development plans. He was still in the area, but he was avoiding Willow Avenue entirely. Whether it was because he knew we were too strong to beat, or because he didn't want the bad press, I didn't care. The important thing was that the house was safe, and so was the heart of our community. On the 1-year anniversary of the referendum victory, we held a small gathering on the porch. Friends, family, and neighbors filled the yard, sharing food and stories. Emily gave a toast, lifting her glass of lemonade high. "To my dad," she said, "for teaching us all that standing up for what matters is worth every fight." I raised my own glass, humbled. "To all of you," I replied, "because no one wins alone." The crowd cheered, and for the first time, I truly felt the full weight of what we had accomplished. We hadn't just stopped the sale. We had reclaimed trust, rebuilt relationships, and strengthened a neighborhood that might have otherwise fallen apart. That night, after everyone had gone, I walked through the house in the quiet. The moonlight spilled across the living room floor, highlighting the grain in the wood I had sanded with my own hands decades ago. Every creak, every shadow felt like it was telling me, "You did right by us." I paused in the hallway, my hand resting on the frame of the front door, and thought about how close I had come to losing it all. That's how I got my so sweet revenge, and I'd do it all over again. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what part of the story made you the most angry, and what you would do if you were in my situation.